You match the description we just got over the radio.
That person had 2 little kids with him?
The report doesn't say anything about children. They could be yours, they might not be. Either way, I need to verify.
I'm just walking my kids home. That's it.
Then this shouldn't take long.
Hey, it's okay. It's okay. I'm right here.
Officer Ethan Price had been cruising his sector on a slow Saturday morning when dispatch pushed out a fresh call. A residential burglary reported on Harrington Way, near the intersection of Briarwood Avenue in Cincinnati, Ohio. The homeowner had returned to a kicked-in back door and missing electronics. A neighbor claimed they'd seen someone earlier, nothing solid, just a glimpse and a guess. The description was painfully thin. Black male, roughly 30-40, wearing dark outerwear, last seen moving away from the street. No height, no build, no facial features, no confirmed vehicle, just a vague template that could fit hundreds of people. 17 minutes later, at 11:18 a.m. on November 18, 2023, Price turned onto Juniper Hollow Court, a quiet residential road more than a mile from the burglary address. The neighborhood looked like any other. Bare trees, small single-family homes, cars parked along the curb, winter sunlight reflecting off patches of frost. Halfway down the block, Price saw a man walking on the sidewalk with 2 small children. What he should have noticed first was the pace, slow, careful, the kind dictated by short legs and puffy coats. The children kept stopping to point at things: a mailbox decorated for fall, a dog barking behind a fence, a bright leaf stuck in a gutter. The man leaned down, listening, smiling, answering. He was holding their hands the way parents do when they're guiding kids home, but Price's brain latched onto the broadcast description instead. Black male, dark jacket, adult. In the general area, the man's name was Malik Carter, though Price didn't know it yet. Malik was 32, wearing a black winter coat over a gray hoodie, jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. He looked like someone on an ordinary errand because he was walking his children home after a quick trip to the park. His son, Jaden, was 3, loud and curious, narrating everything he saw like it was a discovery. His daughter, Ari, was 2, shy and clingy, her tiny hand wrapped around Malik's fingers like a lifeline. Malik had taken them out that morning to give his wife a break while she finished paperwork at home. Swings, a short slide, cold cheeks, a couple photos sent to mom, then back home for lunch. Nothing suspicious, nothing unusual. Price slowed his cruiser. He didn't consider the distance from the burglary. He didn't consider the lack of any concrete identifying detail. He didn't consider that burglars don't typically stroll down a sidewalk holding toddlers' hands. Instead, he drifted his patrol car alongside the curb and activated his body camera. Not because he had clear, reasonable suspicion, not because he saw a crime in progress, but because he trusted a vague description and his own assumptions. "Hey, sir," Price called out through the open window. "Can I talk to you for a second?" Malik stopped. His face flickered with confusion before settling into caution. He kept hold of both children, steadying them as they turned toward the officer. "Sure, officer," Malik said. "Is everything okay?" Price stepped out. His posture was controlled, firm. One hand rested near his duty belt, subtle but not relaxed. "You match the description of someone we're looking for," Price said. Malik felt his stomach drop. Jaden's chatter stopped instantly. Ari shifted closer to Malik's leg, sensing the tension. Malik glanced down at his kids, then back at the officer. "The person you're looking for," Malik asked carefully, "were they with 2 little kids?" Price barely glanced at the children. "Doesn't say anything about kids," he replied. "Could be yours, could be not. Either way, I need to verify." The words hit like ice water. Malik stared at him, trying to process what was being implied, right in front of the children holding his hands. "These are my kids," Malik said, forcing his voice calm. "We're walking home from the park." Price's tone didn't soften. "Then this will be quick," he said. "I need to see your ID." Jaden tightened his grip on Malik's hand. "Daddy," he whispered, eyes wide, "why is the policeman mad?" Malik swallowed hard. "It's okay," he told him gently. "We're okay." But they weren't, and the next few minutes on this quiet sidewalk in broad daylight were about to leave a mark that wouldn't fade easily. Malik took a slow breath and shifted his weight, trying to keep both children close. The sidewalk suddenly felt too open, too exposed. Jaden stood rigid at his left side, eyes locked on the officer's badge. Ari pressed her small body against Malik's leg, her fingers tightening in the fabric of his jeans. "Daddy," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've got you," Malik said softly, without taking his eyes off Officer Price. Price stepped closer, positioning himself directly in front of them, subtly blocking their path forward. It wasn't aggressive in the way movies portray police encounters, but it was unmistakably controlling. Malik registered it immediately. "Go ahead and hand me your ID," Price said. "Driver's license." Malik hesitated for half a second, not out of defiance, but calculation. He knew the balance he had to strike. Too slow and he'd be labeled uncooperative. Too fast and his children would panic when he let go. "I'm going to reach into my pocket," Malik said evenly. "Okay," Price gave a short nod. Malik released Ari's hand first. Instantly her face crumpled. "No, Daddy," she whimpered. "It's okay, baby," Malik said, bending slightly. "Hold my leg just like that." Ari wrapped both arms around his thigh, burying her face into him. Malik slid his free hand into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet, careful, deliberate. He handed over his license. Price took it without comment and glanced down. Malik Carter, address. Juniper Hollow Court, the very street they were standing on. Price didn't acknowledge the address. Instead, he lifted his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 512, he said. "I'm on Juniper Hollow running a pedestrian stop. Need a check on a Malik Carter, date of birth July 4th, 1991. "Copy, Unit 512, the dispatcher replied. "Stand by," the pause stretched. Cold air crept through Malik's coat. Jaden shifted from foot to foot. "I'm cold," Jaden said quietly. "I know, buddy," Malik replied. "We'll be home soon." He looked back at Price. "Officer, we live right here, 3 houses down. I'm just taking my kids home." Price glanced at the license again, then back up. "Sir, until I finish verifying, I need you to remain where you are." "Verifying what?" Malik asked. His tone was controlled, but there was strain under it now. "You have my ID, you see my address." Price didn't answer immediately. His eyes flicked to the kids for the first time, just briefly, like an afterthought. "I need to confirm these children are yours," he said. The words hung in the air. Malik felt heat rush to his face. "Confirm how? However necessary," Price replied. "People use all kinds of tactics to avoid detection." Jaden looked up sharply. "Daddy," Malik crouched slightly so he was closer to their level, even as his heart hammered. "Listen to me," he said gently to both kids. "You didn't do anything wrong. Daddy didn't do anything wrong." Price shifted his stance. "Sir, stand up." Malik straightened slowly, lifting Ari into his arms when she began to cry. She wrapped herself around his neck, sobbing now, her small body trembling. "You see what you're doing," Malik said, his voice cracking despite his effort. "You're scaring my children." "I'm doing my job," Price replied flatly. The radio crackled. "Unit 512, ID comes back clear. No warrants, valid license." Price exhaled through his nose. The confirmation should have ended it. Instead, he lingered. "Clear ID doesn't answer everything," he said. "I still need to know your relationship to these kids." Malik stared at him in disbelief. "She just called me daddy," Malik said, gesturing to Ari, who was crying into his shoulder. "He's been calling me that since he learned to talk." "That doesn't prove anything," Price said. "Kids can be coached." The sentence landed like a punch. Jaden's face twisted, confusion turning into fear. "Why doesn't he believe you?" he asked. Malik closed his eyes for a brief second. Because to this officer, Malik realized, being a black man walking with children wasn't evidence of fatherhood. It was something to be questioned. And the longer this went on, the harder it was becoming to protect the 2 small people who trusted him to keep them safe. Ari's sobs had turned into sharp, frightened gasps. Malik rocked her gently, murmuring reassurances, but his own hands were starting to shake. Jaden stood frozen, tears sliding silently down his cheeks as he watched the exchange he didn't understand. "Daddy, can we go home now?" he asked. Malik looked past his son to Officer Price. "You're done," Malik said, his voice firmer now. "You ran my ID, it's clean, you're standing in front of my house." "What else do you need?" Price's jaw tightened. He didn't like the challenge, even though Malik hadn't raised his voice. "Sir, you don't get to decide when this interaction ends. And you don't get to traumatize my kids because you feel like something's off," Malik replied. "You have no reason to hold us here." Price took a half step back, then another forward, as if recalibrating control. "I'm going to ask you again," he said. "Can you prove these children are yours?" Malik let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh before he could stop himself. "Prove it how? You want birth certificates, DNA, what exactly satisfies you?" Before Price could answer, a front door creaked open 3 houses down. Evelyn Brooks, a woman in her late 60s with silver hair and a heavy winter cardigan, stepped onto her porch. She'd lived on Juniper Hollow Court for nearly 40 years. She recognized Malik immediately. She recognized his kids, too. She stood there for a moment watching the police car, the officer, the crying children. Then she started walking. "What's going on here?" Evelyn called out, her voice sharp despite her age. Price turned toward her. "Ma'am, please stay back. This is an active investigation." "An investigation into what?" Evelyn asked, stopping a few feet away. "That man lives right there." She pointed directly at Malik's house. "I've watched him walk those kids past my window every week since they were born." Price's face flushed. "Ma'am, I'm handling a situation. You're harassing a father in front of his babies," Evelyn cut in, "and you should be ashamed." Malik felt a wave of relief so strong it nearly knocked him over. Someone saw it. Someone said it out loud. "Thank you," Malik said quietly. Evelyn turned to him. "I'm sorry you're dealing with this," she said. "Those kids okay?" Malik shook his head slightly. "No," Jaden sniffed and looked at Evelyn. "He thinks my daddy isn't my daddy," he said, his voice breaking. Evelyn's expression hardened. She turned back to Price. "Did you hear that? He's 3 years old. What kind of damage do you think you're doing?" Price looked cornered now. His radio crackled again, but he ignored it. "I was following protocol," he said weakly. "No," Evelyn replied. "You were following a stereotype." There was a long, uncomfortable silence. Finally, Price exhaled. He stepped closer and handed Malik his license back. "You're free to go," he said. "You can take your children home." Malik didn't respond. He adjusted Ari higher on his hip, then lifted Jaden with his free arm. Both children clung to him instinctively. As he walked past Price, Malik stopped for half a second. "You didn't just stop me," he said quietly. "You taught my kids something today they were too young to learn." Price didn't answer. Evelyn walked with Malik for a few steps, placing herself between him and the officer until they reached the front of the house. When Malik opened the door and stepped inside, the crying didn't stop. And inside that house, in a space that was supposed to feel safe, the echoes of the sidewalk followed them in. The front door shut behind Malik with a dull thud, but the sound didn't bring relief. Ari was still crying hard, her small fists knotted in Malik's jacket. Jaden's face was blotchy and wet, his breath coming in uneven hiccups. Malik lowered them both carefully to the living room rug, then knelt in front of them, forcing his voice to stay steady even as his chest burned. "It's okay," he repeated. "Daddy's here, nobody's taking anybody." From the kitchen, Tanya heard the noise and rushed in. One look at the children told her something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, already dropping to her knees. Malik tried to answer, but the words came out tangled. "A cop, he stopped us, said the kids might not be mine." Tanya froze. "He said what?" She pulled Ari into her arms, rocking her, whispering reassurances. Jaden climbed into Tanya's lap too, clinging to her sweater like it was a shield. "He thought I was using them as cover," Malik said, his hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Right there on the sidewalk, Tanya's face shifted from shock to anger so fast it scared Malik. "In front of them?" she demanded. "Yes." Jaden looked up at her, eyes wide. "Mommy, is the policeman going to come back?" Tanya's throat tightened. "No, baby," she said quickly. "He's not coming back." But Malik saw the lie for what it was. She didn't know that, neither did he. It took nearly an hour before the children calmed down. Ari refused to let go of Tanya's neck. Jaden flinched every time a car passed outside. Malik sat on the couch, replaying the officer's words over and over in his head. "Could be yours, could be not." The casual cruelty of it made his stomach turn. Tanya called her sister first, then Malik's mother. Both were furious. Both said the same thing: "This isn't right, you can't let this go." That night, after the kids were finally asleep, Malik opened his laptop. He requested the body camera footage through the city's public records portal and filed a formal complaint with the police department. Tanya sat beside him, reading over every word. 2 days later, they met attorney Lena Whitfield, a civil rights lawyer recommended by a family friend. She watched the footage in silence, her jaw tightening with each minute. "This is bad," Lena said finally. "Not just unprofessional, unconstitutional." She explained it carefully: no reasonable suspicion, a stop based on race and vague clothing. Detaining a parent while accusing him of not being the children's father, emotional harm to minors. "This shouldn't have happened," Lena said, "and it's going to matter that it did." An internal investigation opened the following week. Supervisors reviewed Officer Price's history. In just over a year on the force, he'd made 52 pedestrian stops, 41 involved black residents, most ended without citations or charges. The pattern was hard to ignore. When investigators interviewed Evelyn Brooks, she didn't mince words. "I watched him," she said. "He didn't see a dad, he saw a suspect." Tanya was interviewed too. She described the nightmares, Jaden waking up crying, Ari refusing to walk outside without being carried. By the time the investigation wrapped up, the conclusion was clear. The stop violated department policy, the accusations were baseless, the harm was real. And soon the footage would be released. Once it was, the world would see exactly what happened on Juniper Hollow Court, and why a quiet walk home became something far more devastating. The body camera footage was released on a Tuesday morning. By noon, it was everywhere. Local news stations ran the clip on loop. A quiet residential street, a father holding 2 small children, an officer standing in front of them. Viewers watched as Malik calmly answered questions, watched as Ari began to cry, watched as Jaden's voice trembled asking why the officer didn't believe his dad. And then came the line that made people gasp out loud. "Kids can be coached." The implication was unmistakable. Within hours, the video spread far beyond Cincinnati. National outlets picked it up. Social media accounts reposted it with captions filled with disbelief and rage. Parents shared it with one sentence over and over again: "This could have been us." By the end of the day, the clip had been viewed tens of millions of times. Comment sections exploded. Some people focused on procedure, others on race, but most couldn't get past the children's faces. 2 toddlers clinging to their father, learning fear from an authority figure they were supposed to trust. A phrase began trending by that evening: "Prove they're yours." Black fathers across the country began posting their own stories, being stopped at playgrounds, questioned in grocery stores, asked if they were babysitters, uncles, help. Men shared photos of themselves with their children, daring the world to see what the officer had refused to see. Fathers doing exactly what fathers are supposed to do. Malik didn't watch the footage again. He didn't need to, he lived it. Jaden's preschool teacher called to check in. Jaden had been quieter than usual, she said. He cried when a police car drove past the playground during recess. Ari had started waking up at night screaming, unable to explain why. Attorney Lena Whitfield moved quickly. Within weeks, she filed a federal civil rights lawsuit on behalf of Malik, Tanya, and their children. The complaint laid everything out: unlawful detention, racial profiling, violation of constitutional rights, and emotional harm to minors. Expert psychologists were brought in. One explained it simply: when young children see their parent treated as dangerous, their sense of safety fractures. The damage doesn't always show immediately, but it lasts. City officials watched the footage in closed-door meetings. They saw the officer ignore the address on Malik's license. They saw him continue questioning even after dispatch cleared Malik. They knew how a jury would react. The police department placed Officer Price on administrative leave. Days later, the announcement came quietly. His employment was terminated. No press conference, no defense, just a short statement citing policy violations. It didn't stop the conversation. Malik began receiving messages from strangers. Some thanked him, others apologized for doubting, for staying silent, for not realizing how common this was. A few tried to justify the stop. Malik ignored those. What mattered was his kids. Therapy sessions began that month. Jaden slowly learned that not every uniform meant danger. Ari stopped clinging so tightly to Tanya's leg, though she still hesitated outside. And while the city prepared its legal response, Malik understood something with painful clarity. This wasn't about one officer. This was about what people assumed when they saw him with his children. And now the entire country was being forced to confront that assumption. The city knew it couldn't win. Every attorney who reviewed the footage reached the same conclusion: a jury wouldn't need legal training to understand what went wrong. They would see a father stopped without cause. They would hear a child cry while an officer questioned whether that father even belonged with his own kids. No legal argument could undo that. Behind closed doors, negotiations began. The city's lawyers pushed for a quick resolution. No trial, no prolonged headlines, no testimony from child psychologists played in open court. After weeks of back and forth, an agreement was reached. In September 2024, the city settled the lawsuit for $285,000. A significant portion of the settlement was placed into protected trust accounts for Jaden and Ari, designated for therapy, education, and long-term care related to the emotional harm they'd suffered. The settlement required more than money. The police department agreed to revise its pedestrian stop policy, explicitly prohibiting stops based solely on vague physical descriptions without corroborating behavior. Officers would undergo mandatory training focused on implicit bias, with the Juniper Hollow footage included as a case study of what not to do. An independent community review panel was also created to monitor patterns in stops and complaints. Officer Ethan Price disappeared from the public eye. Once the footage went viral, law enforcement agencies wouldn't touch him. Applications went unanswered. Background checks led to quiet rejections. By the following year, he was working hourly jobs, living back in his childhood home, the video always a click away. At 28, his career was over. Malik didn't celebrate that. What stayed with him was the cost that never made headlines. He had to have conversations with Jaden far earlier than he'd planned. Conversations about police, about fairness. About how sometimes people make assumptions that aren't true and how those assumptions can hurt. "Did I do something wrong?" Jaden asked him once. "No," Malik said, his voice thick. "You did everything right." By the end of the year, life began to resemble normal again. Malik still walked his children through the neighborhood, still took them to the park, but he carried his phone in his hand now, always charged. Always ready. Tanya watched from the window when they left, every time. The city council passed a resolution condemning racial profiling in pedestrian stops. Local academies updated their training materials. The footage was used in classrooms as a warning, but the most lasting impact wasn't policy. It was the conversation. People began talking openly about how Black fatherhood is viewed, how presence is questioned, how care is mistaken for cover, how being a good parent doesn't protect you from suspicion. Malik hadn't asked to be part of that conversation, but he'd been forced into it. And one part of the story still remained: what it all meant after the cameras moved on. That truth would live with his family long after the headlines faded. Time softened the edges, but it never erased the mark. Months after the settlement, the viral video had stopped circulating, replaced by the next outrage, the next headline. But inside Malik and Tanya's home, the consequences lingered in quieter ways. Jaden still tensed when he heard sirens. Ari still hesitated before letting go of a parent's hand in public. Healing came slowly, unevenly, in small steps no camera ever recorded. Malik often replayed that morning in his mind, not because he wanted to, but because it forced a truth into focus. He hadn't been stopped because of where he was going. He hadn't been stopped because of what he was doing. He had been stopped because of how he looked while doing something ordinary, walking his children home. That realization changed how he moved through the world. He became more deliberate, more alert. more prepared to explain his existence in moments where no explanation should ever be required. Fatherhood, for him, came with an added responsibility, proof. Jaden grew older with questions Malik never wanted him to ask so soon. Why didn't he believe you were my dad? Would that happen to other kids? Does it happen because we're black? Malik answered as gently and honestly as he could. He told his son that some people see fear where there is none, that some systems carry old biases even when they claim to be neutral, and that none of it meant there was anything wrong with him. What happened on Juniper Hollow Court became a reference point in training rooms and city meetings. Officials cited it as an example of failure. Activists pointed to it as evidence of a broader problem. Scholars discussed it in studies about perception and race, but for Malik, it was never theoretical. It was his children crying on a sidewalk. It was a neighbor stepping in to say what should have been obvious. It was a question no father should ever have to answer. Are they really yours? The irony was cruel. Society often claims black fathers are absent, and yet when they are present, when they show up, stay involved, hold small hands and walk slowly home, they are met with suspicion instead of trust. That is what the video revealed. Not a dangerous man, not a justified stop, but the cost of being seen through a distorted lens. Malik still walks his children to the park. He still bends down to listen to their stories. He still holds their hands. He just knows now that for some people that will never be enough. And that is what parenting while black really means. If this story made you uncomfortable, it should have. If it made you angry, you're not alone. Comment right now and tell us where you're watching from, and whether you believe a father should ever have to prove his right to walk with his own children. Ask yourself honestly, if this had been your family on that sidewalk, would you have stayed calm or demanded accountability? Stories like this only change things when people refuse to look away, so say something, share your perspective, and decide which side of history you'd want to be on if it were your kids holding your hand.